Hey, welcome back here on Coastal Daybreak on the talk station, FM 107 and AM 1240. Thanks for joining us here today. We do appreciate that. Our next guest is Robert Spencer, and you may know Robert already from his New York Times best-selling author and director of the Jihad Watch, a program of the David Horowitz Freedom Center, and joins us now. His new book is called The Complete Infidels Guide to Iran, and I think I include myself in that infidel group. So, Robert, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Good to have you with us here today. Tell us, you make the case for Iran being something that we need to be more concerned about than even ISIS. Why is that?
Yes. Well, ISIS does the showy attacks. There's no doubt that they're a lethal group that we have to take seriously. They inspire Muslims to do things like the massacre in Orlando that we just recently saw, and there will be more of those. But Iran is more insidious, perhaps in large part, because they work behind the scenes. Iran is what ISIS wants to be when it grows up. It is an Islamic state that is based firmly on Islamic principles, and it controls a global network of terrorist organizations, which is ultimately something that's potentially much more dangerous than a lot of lone wolves. They have Hezbollah, which is not just in Lebanon, but is actively working in the Western Hemisphere, in South America, in several places, and most ominously in northern Mexico, collaborating with the drug cartels and preparing to cross over into the United States.
So Iran is the command and control, as much as there can be one, of terrorism.
Yeah, Hezbollah is a wholly owned and operated subsidiary of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, which is the paramilitary force, or the military force that is essentially in control in Iran, is the power behind the mullahs, the clerics who rule the country. And they also fund Hamas, which is interesting because Iran is Shiite and Hamas is Sunni, and the Sunnis and the Shiites hate each other, but they hate infidels more. And so they work together against non-Muslims.
Back in the 70s, when we saw the hostages taken in Iran, and we saw the Shah being deposed, and the Ayatollah Khomeini returning from exile, and that became Iran became a very different country to the West. I mean, my father used to fly in and out of there on business all the time, but not any longer would people do that. So, is it still an Ayatollah Khomeini rule?
Yeah, the Ayatollah Khomeini set up an Islamic Republic, and he set up a chain of command that continues in form today, with the idea being that Islamic clerics have to rule the country because Muhammad, as the prophet, was the ruler of the Muslims, and so clerics are the only rightful rulers of a Muslim country. And so his successor, the Ayatollah Khamenei, is essentially the same, cut from the same cloth. They have the same goals. You're quite right. When you talk about your father going in and out of there, Iran was a westernized country that was secular under the Shah and was very friendly to the United States. But since the Islamic Revolution, it's been on essentially a war footing with the United States. And this is something that I think that the American government has consistently disregarded or underestimated in terms of its potential. But as I show in the book, the Iranian war activities have been quite extensive, and they routinely have, Iranian officials routinely have said, we ultimately are going to go to war with the United States, we're going to destroy the United States. Of course, it sounds ludicrous because the Iranian military is so much smaller, but they're not talking about a hot, direct shooting war. They're talking about a war of subversion and infiltration, which they are actively pursuing.
You mentioned about Iran and again the command and control kind of idea there of terrorism. But how much do they represent? You mentioned also the Shiites and Sunnis hate each other, but they hate the infidels more. So how much does Iran represent the whole of Islam?
Not much. I mean, Iran wants to be the leader of the entire Islamic world, but this is the big problem that they face, that they are the Shiite state, and the Shiites are only 10 to 15% of Muslims worldwide. But this is why they fund groups like Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, even Al-Qaeda and the Taliban to a certain extent. because they want to position themselves as being the patron and benefactor even of the Sunni jihad groups. And ultimately they hope to win them over and to allow to induce them to accept Iran's hegemony over the Muslim world. Of course, the Saudis and Turkey are never going to go for that, and they're increasingly antagonistic because of Iran's aggressiveness.
Robert Spencer, our guest. The book is called The Complete Infidels' Guide to Iran. We talk about Iran and again Muslim clerical leadership. You frequently use a quote in your book called "Islam is a religion that prevents men from waging war. I spit upon those foolish souls who make such a claim." That's from the Ayatollah. And you contrast that with claims or from Hillary Clinton about, let's be clear, Islam is not our adversary. Claims from Theresa May, who is now the new prime minister in England, says the attacks have nothing to do with Islam. And you place that contrast, yet you say, though, that Iran's Shiites represent a small element of Islam.
Yeah, the thing is, though, that there are Islamic principles that mandate warfare against unbelievers. And this is the problem, that the Iranian government is basing its aggressiveness toward the United States, its war footing toward the United States, on these Islamic principles, and is calling upon Sunni Muslims to acknowledge that they ought to also go to war with the United States on the basis of the same Islamic principles. And so for Western leaders like Hillary Clinton and Theresa May to just brush all that aside and say, no, Islam is a religion of peace, it is a dangerous blind alley. It leads us to underestimate and misunderstand the motives and the goals of the enemy. And, of course, this being official Obama administration policy about Islam being peaceful, it's led to all these things, and most notably this disastrous Iranian nuclear deal that is based on the idea that the Iranian government will be happy to come to some peaceful accord and join the family of nations. And they have to ignore a mountain of statements from the Iranian leadership about the war that they're pursuing in order to put that across.
Did we miss an opportunity to return some sensible leadership to Iran a few years back when it looked like there may have been a popular uprising possible?
Yes, in the Green Movement in 2009,
right,
there was a chance, there were people marching in the streets, and it's notable that Barack Obama had no problem enthusiastically endorsing the Arab Spring in Egypt, which led to Muslim Brotherhood rule and disaster. But he did not support these protesters who would have ushered in a much more humane regime, and certainly one that would not have been on this nuclear suicide course that Iran seems to be pursuing now.
Is ISIS as evil and as cruel as they are? Is ISIS a distraction for the West from the dangers of Iran?
Yes, there's no doubt about that. Look, ISIS is a deeply evil group and needs to be removed. But it could have been, and still could be, if the West would decide to go in and take out the Islamic State. They could do so within a matter of weeks. This is not a huge, formidable military force. And so the fact is, though, that Iran is an established country with a glorious history and a much more powerful base, and yet they have the same kind of insidious goals. So it's a very, very difficult situation, and we're really in the position of misapprehending both threats.
The Complete Infidels' Guide to Iran, Robert Spencer, out on Regnery Press and Regnery Publishing. And thank you, Robert, for joining us this morning. You can find out more at jihadwatch.org. This is Coastal Daybreak here on the Talk Station. We'll wrap up the program in just a moment.